won't turn for some reason. Hold on.
Well, hello and good morning, everybody. Hey, it's great to see you guys. Yeah. Well, we're waiting on a few more people to kind of show up and get settled and find the room. But in the meantime, anybody care to share either a win or an insight or a gratitude or some positivity this morning? Anybody who, just by a show of hands, who's enjoying the holidays, a little bit of a break from the normalcy or the grind? Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to welcome each and every one of you to Let Go to Grow and Forgive to Be Free. Now, this is a two-part series, okay? And so we're going to start with Let Go to Grow. And then we're going to take about a 5 or a 10-minute intermission, depending on how much time we have. And then we're going to come back and complete part 2, which is Forgive to Be Free. Okay. And the whole process includes 4 specific clearing exercises. Okay. So I see a number of people shuffling some papers. I hope everybody's got some pen and paper handy. If you don't, maybe take a second and grab one. Or your phone. Your phone might work too if you're taking notes in the notes app, something like that. Okay. But I want to commend each of you guys for showing up today. And this kind of comes with a word of caution, but some of what we're going to experience and some of what we're going to do today might not be easy. Okay. And the fact that you guys are here and you're showing up for yourself says a lot about you and about your character and your willingness to grow. So I think each of us, why don't we just pause right there and let's just give ourselves a little one of these, a little pat on the back here, hey? That's okay, Jamie. I'll wait. Yeah, okay, right, a little high five, right on. Cool. I also wanted to just kind of like a full disclosure here, okay? Full disclosure, I'm not a therapist, okay? I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not trained in this in any specific capacity, okay? But I've experienced this myself, and I've gone through these exercises myself. And to be honest with you, it was some of the hardest, but also the most rewarding activities of my life. And I feel compelled to kind of share this experience in hopes that some of you might experience some of the same kind of freedom that I found from forgiveness and from letting go, and the love that I've experienced, the acceptance that I've experienced, the self-confidence that's come from this, and just kind of like the self-love that's come as a result of doing some of these activities has been very profound. And so I feel like if I were to keep this all to myself, I would probably be doing you guys a disservice by not sharing some of this. So I just want to say again, I'm not trained in this specifically. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. And depending on the nature of what comes up for you guys today, some people may want to seek out a therapist or a counselor to work through some of this further. Okay, so I just want to put that out there and come clean. Okay, but the other thing that I wanted to say was today we're going to start a process. This is the beginning of what could be a much longer process. Okay, we don't likely have the time nor the capacity to like one and done with this today. Okay, but my intention is to provide the tools and the opportunity to sit down and address some of the things that might arise. And then it's up to you in the future to, spend some time with it, to revisit it, to elaborate on it, and to go back and redo some of these types of things. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to mention before we start is, obviously this is kind of what we would hope to be a bit of a safe place. Okay, so anything that comes up here or anything that is said here, I would hope that this remains here. Okay, this isn't for anybody else to share or to talk about or to go off and discuss with other people. Is that fair? Everybody kind of in agreement with that? Cool. Cool. Yeah, like I had mentioned, this is likely to be somewhat of an uncomfortable experience. Okay, and sometimes it can be just downright painful. And I often use the analogy of trying to like remove a sliver. You know, we've all probably experienced times where we've brushed up against something, we've gotten a thorn or a sliver in our skin, right? And I see this even with my young kids. You know, my young kids, they get a sliver or a cut or something like that. And their immediate response is to, well, don't touch it. You know, don't look at it, don't touch it, you know, and they want to try to avoid it as much as possible, right? Who here has experienced that? Yeah, everybody, right? Well, we know as adults and we know as parents that the best thing that we can do in those types of situations is what? Well, you got to go in there, you got to kind of dig around a little bit with some tweezers or something, and you got to pull out and extract the sliver. But what happens if you don't extract the sliver? Wow, it gets all like infected and it festers and it gets even more sore, doesn't it? Totally, you know. But I find we know that when it comes to physical slivers and physical pain, but how often do we do that similar type of thing with mental or emotional wounds, where we just kind of like brush it off to the side or push it down or choose not to look at it, don't address it, don't talk about it, kind of sweep it under the rug and move on? I know that as a young guy, that was kind of the environment that I grew up in, was just kind of sweep it under the rug and, you know, carry on. The problem with that is that that pile under the rug starts to get pretty big, you know what I mean? Pretty soon people are tripping over it. So this is a little bit like that. I find that when I did this experience, I found that it was painful as all get out to go in there, dig around and remove that. But what that did was really allowed me to begin the healing process. It allowed me to begin to work through some of that and actually discard that rather than just avoid it or numb it or distract myself from it or pretend that it wasn't there, like we have a tendency to do sometimes. Okay. And one of my favorite lines that I keep coming back to is a favorite quote, and I'm not even sure who says this, but I should probably find out. It's that the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek the most.
It's Jordan Peterson.
And I know that he shares that, but I don't know if that is actually his
If it's
quote.
originally from him.
Is it really?
That's no, I was agreeing with you. I don't know if it's his either, but that's where I've heard it.
I have heard him mention something similar to that too. Yeah. But I think that that's really true in my experience, is that oftentimes it's the challenges that are the hardest or the scariest are often the most rewarding. I'll say that again, the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek the most. And I find that so oftentimes it's those things that provide the biggest opportunity for growth. They're simultaneously the ones that we least want to acknowledge or least want to face. Okay. So I have a question for you. You know, we're talking about mental and emotional blocks. What does that mean for you? What do you guys think that what is a mental and emotional block? What is that? Any guesses? Anybody care to their best estimate? Yeah, Leah.
Just something that stops you from moving forward in your life. Just it basically brings your life to a grinding halt, and you end up being like a dog chasing its tail.
Yeah, something that stops you or yeah, brings your life to a halt. Yeah. Brett.
Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
Oh, that's who said that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love Joseph Campbell. He also wrote The Hero's Journey, didn't he?
Hey, Matt, can you say the rest of that quote again?
The cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek the most.
Treasure that you seek the most. Thank you. And thanks for looking that up, Brett, if that was you.
So my understanding of a mental or emotional block is anything that either, slows, stops, or restricts the flow of energy. Okay. And if you think about it this through the lens of universal law, there's a universal law, the law of circulation. And the law of circulation exists in all sorts of different environments. Okay. You see this happen in the air, with the wind and the way that the air circulates around the globe. You see this with water, right? The way that, rain circulates up into the clouds and it falls as rain and then down through the streams and back into the ocean, right? Well, what happens if water all of a sudden, sits and becomes stagnant in a pool of water? If it ceases to move or ceases to flow, it almost becomes dangerous to consume now, doesn't it? It can make you quite ill, if you were to drink it. I think about the circulatory system in our bodies too, right? The law of circulation states that blood's got to be circulating through your system all the time. But what happens if blood flow ceases to move, or if it stops or is restricted? That's real dangerous too, isn't it? Of course, it can result in death, Well, I find that the same is true for mental and emotional energy as well. Mental and emotional blocks often, come in the form of repressed emotions. Those are repressed emotions are sometimes things like fear, anger, guilt, and shame, right? Things like doubt or resentment, frustration. And what we need to understand is that thoughts and emotions need to be expressed. And emotions that aren't expressed become suppressed. And over time, suppressed emotions, they must express themselves. So they come out in unhealthy ways. And suppressed emotions eventually lead to things like depression, addiction, or dis-ease or disease. And this disease can actually manifest itself physically in the body in all sorts of ways. And anybody who's at all interested in this kind of thing can look up, there's a woman by the name of Louise Hay. We won't get into that now, but Louise Hay has a number of different teachings about the physical manifestations of mental and emotional dis-ease, I guess we'll call it. The physical manifestations of mental and emotional dis-ease. Okay. Now, when we're talking about repressed emotions, things like fear, things like guilt, things like shame, things like anger, things like resentment, I want to pull up this that many of you have probably seen by now. Okay. But this is our, can everybody see this okay?
Mhm.
Okay. This is our vibrational analysis chart. Okay. And we talk about the law of vibration, right? We talk about the law of attraction and how the law of attraction is based on the universal law of the law of vibration. And when you're feeling feelings of guilt or insecurity, I would put shame, things like that down here. There's rage or anger, okay, doubt. I don't see resentment on this one necessarily, but I see like frustration, anger, jealousy, insecurity, guilt, and shame are some of the most common ones that I hear about, and some of the most common ones that have come up for me. These are all low vibration energies, right? These are low vibration energies. And we know based on the law of attraction, okay, the energies that vibrate on a similar frequency attract. So when you're vibrating on a frequency of guilt or shame, you're only attracting more negative experiences into your life, more negative people, more negative experiences, more negative situations. And when we start to find forgiveness, work through some of those blockages to get energy flowing to these specific areas, and we can start to experience things like love, enthusiasm, hopefulness, freedom. Those are high vibration energies. I don't see forgiveness on here, but I think it would be right up here with freedom, with joy. I'd add like peace of mind. And when you start to work through some of those blockages, those mental and emotional blockages, and you start to, replace that with things like forgiveness, with understanding, with love, acceptance, freedom, peace of mind, and joy, it's going to transform your world. It's going to change the way that you think. It's going to change the way that you feel, and it's going to change the way that you experience life. It's going to change the things that you attract into your life. Okay. So my hope is that by working through some of this stuff, we learn to let go of some of these low vibration energies. And remember, this is the beginning of what could be a process, and replace it with some more empowering emotions, some more empowering energies like freedom, joy, love, and acceptance. Okay. So, if we've got a mental or an emotional block, how do you get that moving again? How do you start to work through that? Well, 2 words for you. Okay, 2 words. Okay. Acknowledge and accept. Acknowledge and accept. Or you might even say like identify and accept. Now, so oftentimes I find that, things like emotions, they're kind of elusive, aren't they? They're real hard to nail down. I had a conversation. I'm going to be real honest with you guys, and I'll be real honest with you guys today, and I'll just be real. And if I cry, I cry. Okay, but emotions can be real difficult sometimes. And they're difficult to identify, they're difficult to work with. And the reason I think that is because so oftentimes they exist on the unconscious level or the subconscious level. Now, I wasn't planning on drawing this out here, but I'm going to draw this real quick. Many of you are familiar with Dr. Thurman Fleet's image of the mind. Okay. And we've got the conscious mind and we've got the subconscious mind. Okay. Now we know that the conscious mind is in control of our thinking faculties, our reasoning faculties. It's oftentimes referred to as our intellect, okay, or our educated mind. Okay. But our subconscious mind is often referred to as our emotional mind or our feeling mind. And oftentimes our feelings and our emotions are a subconscious activity that we're not consciously aware of. I had a conversation with Anna a couple of weeks ago where I was a little bit kind of flustered about something. We were sitting in our kitchen and I was upset about something. And she asked me, like, just point blank, like, what is it that you're upset about? What's going on? And I had a very difficult time. I didn't know. Like, I had to sit there and just be like, and I just said to her, I was like, I don't know what I'm upset about right now. I don't really know. And then afterwards, we kind of regrouped and she talked about that with me. And she said, you know what, even just being able to identify that you're not quite sure what it is that you're feeling, she's like, that's kind of a win too, isn't it? And I was like, well, yeah, being able to articulate that I don't know, kind of just buys you a little bit of time and maybe even just a little bit of like grace, but I was processing that emotion on a subconscious level. I could feel it, but I wasn't intellectually aware of what it was that I was feeling. I just knew that it didn't feel good. Who here's ever experienced that, where you're upset and maybe you don't exactly know why? Yeah. So I came across another little diagram here that I thought was super fascinating. And it, has anybody ever seen this before? Yeah, a couple people. So this is the wheel of emotion. I just love the way that just rolls off my tongue. Okay, the wheel of emotion. And I found that this was super helpful in ways to identify and also explain or articulate a little bit more clearly what somebody might be potentially feeling. You know, and some of the most common things are things like, well, let's say fearful. Let's pick fearful here. You know, fearful sometimes just isn't enough to summarize or identify or articulate what it is that you're feeling. And so I find like something like this could go even deeper. And so it offers some suggestions on other words like anxious. Like whoever here feels anxious. I mean, it's something I get all the time. You know, or insecure. You know, but you could even take it a little bit further and maybe what your fear is actually stemming from is a feeling of inferiority or inadequacy, feeling like either you're not prepared enough or you're not smart enough or something like that. Or maybe it stems from feeling overwhelmed, you know. So I found this little wheel to be super helpful in just kind of lending us the words to describe and understand what some of those emotions are that we could be feeling at any given time. But there's angry, there's happy, there's sad, and there's a whole list of other ones. So I've included this in an email, so you guys don't have to feel like you have to scribble this down at all. But I've included this in an email and sent it to each of you guys, so you have it for future references. Okay. But I find that even just being able to identify negative emotions or negative beliefs is a challenge in and of itself, you know? So when we're talking about negative emotions or we're talking about negative beliefs, okay, the first part of this, remember I said there's two parts to this program today. The first part is called Let Go to Grow, and it's about identifying and overcoming either limiting emotions, negative emotions, or limiting beliefs, identify and overcome them. Okay. And the second part is forgiving to be free. So the first part here with let go to grow. Okay. We're going to identify what some of those limiting beliefs might be, or what some of those limiting emotions or negative emotions might be. Okay. And if you guys have a pen and paper handy, we're going to do a little journaling exercise here. Okay. And the reason I like journaling so much is because of something that Dr. Carl Jung said, that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you'll just call it fate. So oftentimes our unconscious drivers or motivators dictate our behavior, and we don't understand it, we don't acknowledge it, and we act on it unconsciously, and we just think that that's the way that things should be or will always be. So journaling helps us bubble up from the depths some of those unconscious beliefs, some of those unconscious fears, some of those unconscious emotions. Okay. And then we can capture them, write them down. Okay. So at the top of a page here, I want you to write down either one of these two statements. Okay. Either write down, the reason I can't have what I want is because, okay, or I'll never blank because. The reason I can't have what I want is because blank, or I can't have blank because. Now, the purpose of this is not to dwell on the reasons why we can't. The purpose of this exercise is to identify what beliefs that we're holding on to, or what beliefs we might have, maybe even unconsciously. Okay, so I'm going to take a few minutes here, and actually, before I do that, just a couple of words of advice or suggestions here. Don't overthink this. Okay, just give yourself chance to write down anything and everything that comes to mind. Okay, don't judge it. You know, don't analyze it. Just write down anything and everything that comes up for you. Okay. And some of the things that may come up are things like, you know, some of the most common held ones that I've experienced are things like I'm unworthy or I'm undeserving. Things like I'm unlovable. Things like I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough. Things like I've done terrible things in the past and I don't deserve to be happy. Okay. Some are the people, including me, are generally selfish and only looking out for number one. So I can't trust others. Okay. Some are things like that the world is a scary or an unsafe place. Some that came up for me were things like money is the root of all evil. You know, or the world's going to hell in a handbasket. What's the point anyway? Nothing I can do. It's out of my control. Okay. Or things like there's not enough to go around. There's not enough love. There's not enough money. There's not enough success, whatever it might be. Okay. So those are some of the things that kind of came up for me, but by no stretch of the imagination is it limited to that. Okay. I'm going to start a little bit of some music here and a timer. And I'm going to give you guys an opportunity just to see what comes up for you. Okay. Okay, right on. Welcome back. So remember, I mean, this activity is meant to begin a process, and this is something that you might want to come back to, revisit, and retry time and time again. Okay, I would encourage you to spend more time with this than just the 5 minutes that I gave you there. I said at the start that I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I'm not going to call on anybody or pressure them to share. But is there anybody that would like to share kind of what came up for them? Either any of the beliefs or emotions that they wrote down?
One is that things in life need to be hard in order to obtain them. So that, the idea that you won't value something that's just been gifted to you, I understand that, but it's taking that mindset to the extreme. And that if you're not constantly grinding and you're not just barely scraping by, then it's not quite worth it.
Yeah, that's a great one, Leah. Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah. Thanks, Leah.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No pressure, just if you feel called to.
One of the things I put down was I have a fear of debt.
Fear of debt.
Yeah. I don't like I don't like having lots of bills. You know what I mean? Everyone I know who's really successful has lived in the same home for 50 years and they've paid everything off. They've been frugal to a point where they can also go on vacations whenever they feel like it or things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thanks, Brett. Did anybody, and you don't have to share specifically, but did anybody think of something or did something come up that they either hadn't really anticipated or expected? It was a bit of a surprise to them. Yeah. I see a couple of head nods. Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
Painful.
Painful. Yeah. Possibly, yeah. So the first step with this exercise is to try to identify or acknowledge a belief or an emotion. Okay. The second step, the second part of that is to begin to accept that belief or the fact that you have that belief or the fact that you feel that emotion. And I find that, especially in the world that we live in today, we live in a world of distraction, don't we? Where distraction is just right at our fingertips. And it's so easy to reach for something the second we begin to feel something that we don't enjoy. And I think that so oftentimes people have a tendency, and I'm speaking from experience here, I think so oftentimes people have a tendency to, numb specific emotions, run from specific emotions, avoid dealing with them, or distract themselves from ever having to look at it or face it. Kind of like the sliver analogy that I used earlier. And kind of paradoxically, I mean, I say this all the time, but life is full of paradoxes. And one of the paradoxes is that the more that you're willing to actually sit with an emotion or sit with something that's uncomfortable, the more that you're willing to face it head on, the less impact, the less control that has over you. And there's that saying that whatever you resist persists. And we've used that line when it comes to affirmations a lot, right? But whatever you resist persists. And I found, personally speaking, that when I allow myself to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling like that, some of the things that we wrote down, it's kind of like a bit of a wave where it hits you, but it comes crashing down on you. But then you know what happens with waves? they dissipate and they go back out. And I found that with negative emotions too. If I'm trying to resist it and I'm trying to stop it, I'm trying not to hold it or not to feel it, well, I mean, that's a losing battle. But if I allow myself to sit with it, to feel it, and then, but it actually dissipates, and in my experience, more quickly than I would have thought. Now, there's certain things that you can do to facilitate that, and I found one of the most helpful things, one of the most beneficial things that I've done in the last number of years is also one of the simplest, and that's something as simple as like going for a walk in nature. And man, does that ever have like healing benefits without your phone, without earbuds, and without stuff like that to distract you, just yourself and your thoughts. Go out for a walk in nature. And man, is that ever one of the most healing and beneficial things. So when we're doing something like this, I want to remind you guys that I want to encourage you, I guess maybe is a better word, to be graceful, to show yourself some love, you know, to be kind, to be patient with yourself, and not have any like judgments or expectations on how you handle this type of stuff. Okay, so be gracious, be kind, you know, be compassionate with yourself. Okay, allow yourself to feel this and deal with it in whatever way is most suitable for you. Okay, but I'm reminded of a practice. This is in Polynesian culture. There's a practice, and I'm probably not going to say this correctly. My Hawaiian is not polished, but there's a phrase or a practice called Ho'oponopono, something to that extent. Okay, and it's used by the big kahunas. Used by the kahunas of the Polynesian culture, which are like the healers or the spiritual gurus. Okay, and this practice consists of like acknowledging and accepting your emotions and maybe even just yourself. Okay, and the Ho'oponopono practice consists of 4 parts. Okay, and you might want to write this down just so you remember for later, but the Ho'oponopono practice consists of I see you, I hear you, I love you, and I forgive you. I see you, I hear you, I love you, and I forgive you. And I found the best thing that I can do in an experience like this is speak to my inner child, or speak to the part of me that's feeling that, and acknowledge that part of you. Say, I see you, I hear you, I love you, and I forgive you. I forgive you for holding on to that. I forgive you for feeling that, even though it might be doing more damage than good. And I find if you really want to take this exercise to the next level, try doing an exercise like that in the mirror while you're holding gaze with yourself. Now, I think back not too long ago where there was a time where I couldn't even look myself in the mirror. I couldn't even look at myself in the eyes in the mirror. And, you know, if you'd ever tried something like that, or if you've ever experienced something like that, you know how powerful that can be. But I think that just tells me that at that point in my life, I had so many things that I was either running from or avoiding, or things that I was not accepting in myself, that I couldn't even look myself in the mirror. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced anything like that, but I think that looking in the mirror and asking yourself or telling yourself some of these things can be a very healing and very loving thing to do. And if you haven't told yourself that you love you lately, maybe it's time. Now, if we've done this activity, you know, and you've participated in this, you might have some things that you've written down on a piece of paper, okay, as far as beliefs or as far as emotions or attitudes, okay? The next step, you might want to ask yourself, like, are you ready to let that go? Are you ready to let that go? Maybe there's a part of you that's not, and that's not for me or anybody else to judge. Okay. But I think so oftentimes what happens is, we have a belief about either ourselves or about the world and the way that we think that it should be. Okay. And we automatically just make the assumption that it's true. That's the problem with beliefs, isn't it? It's like the second that we have a belief about something, we defend it to all lengths, don't we? And we just assume that, well, we must be right. But the truth is that a belief is just a thought that you continue to think. A belief is just a thought that you continue to think. It doesn't necessarily make it true. I mean, think about it. People believed all kinds of things over the years. People believed that the earth was flat. People, if you tried to tell them anything different, they would burn you. People believed the earth was flat. People believed that the sun revolved around the earth. Well, of course, I mean, when you look out of the sky, I mean, that's what it looks like. But I imagine that if you really thought about it, you've probably had beliefs in the past that you believed in firmly that you maybe since come to change or since come to understand that, well, maybe that was inaccurate. I used to have beliefs about, alcohol is a good one. I mean, I believed all sorts of things about alcohol. I believed that it made me funnier. I believe that it made me more confident. I believe that, it was relaxing. I'm finding out now that actually I'm much more confident and outgoing without alcohol. I'm actually much more comfortable in my own skin without alcohol. I'm actually a lot more rested without alcohol. That just sitting down cracking a pop top, it doesn't actually rejuvenate or recharge you. There's much more rejuvenating, recharging, and restful activities. I used to have a belief that I was not a very good reader, so I never read. I used to read a paragraph or a page and then I'd forget everything that I just read. So I just assumed, well, I'm not a good reader. What I learned is that actually if I engage with my reading and I highlight or underline and make notes in the margin, actually I'm a very good reader. And not only am I a good reader, but I retain a lot of it and I actually enjoy it. And I burn through books now. So I imagine that many of you, if you thought about it, could probably think of at least one or two things that you used to believe that maybe doesn't hold true anymore. So the second part of this activity, the first part is to identify what this belief might be. Okay. The second part is to try to come up with ideas or examples of or statements that contradict that belief. Okay. Now here's what I mean by this. I was first introduced to this idea when I went down to Tony Robbins' event in Las Vegas. This was back in about 2016, I think. And they were talking about how this is a interrogation technique that's used by the CIA. Okay, it's like counterintelligence unit or something like that. And what they do is he called this woman up on stage and he said, I want you to share with me something that you believe strongly. Okay. And we're going to see if we can get you to change your opinion about this. And she said, well, I believe strongly that I'm a sexy woman. And everybody just erupted laughing. And he's like, no. We want to encourage that. That's an empowering belief. Okay. Why don't we just take like a different belief? And so he got her to think of another one. And the belief that she shared was that her parents were like Jane and Joe Smith. Okay. And she said, those are my parents. Okay. And those are my parents. And he said, okay. Do you have like documentation or footage from the delivery room that shows that those are your actual parents? And she thought about it. Well, no, I don't have that. Well, is there a possibility that, back then when babies were born, they're all taken into a like shared room and they were all in the same room on those little beds, right? Is there a possibility that you were mixed up at birth and that you went home with a different set of parents? Well, it's pretty unlikely, but I mean, I guess it's possible, she said. And then he asked, well, have your parents ever lied to you about anything else? Have your parents ever lied to you? And she said, well, I'm sure that they have. Yeah, I can think of a couple times. And then he said, well, have you ever taken a DNA test with yourself and compared it against the DNA tests of your parents? And now this was back in 2016 where things like 23andMe weren't as readily available. But she said, well, no, I've never done DNA testing against me and my parents. He said, well, you know, I have documentation. And then he like went on to elaborate on this story to start to plant seeds of doubt in her mind or punch holes in her belief. Okay. Now, why is this like, why am I bringing this up? Well, I think that oftentimes what happens is we create an idea or a belief. And what happens is we get fixated on the belief and we become blind to everything that might contradict that belief. That's part of the nature of the way that our minds work and that our brains work, is we become fixated on the belief and we become blind to everything that might contradict that. And so like an example of this might be, I shared one of the beliefs that have come up for me in the past was that I'm not smart enough. Okay, well, I think back and what are some statements that contradict that? Well, I graduated university. You know, I was in the honors roll in high school. You know, I wrote the LSATs. I passed the LSATs, which is the entry exam to law school. I passed that. That's a pretty hard exam. You know, I've been self-employed for coming up 10 years now. I mean, you can't be a complete tool and be self-employed for 10 years, can you? I don't know. I don't think so. I choose not to believe that. You know, I've got some amazing clients who I think are brilliant, who choose to work with me. They could work with anybody and they choose to work with me. Well, that must say something about either my intelligence or my smarts. So I'd start to write down all of the statements that I can think of, maybe 3 or 5, for each of those negative beliefs that came up, or those negative statements, just to try to punch holes in that belief or show that, well, hey, maybe it's possible that that belief doesn't hold water. See what I'm saying? Mark Twain famously said, he said, it's not the thing, he said, there's things that you know and there's things that you don't know. There's things that you know and there's things that you don't know. And it's not the things that you don't know that get you in trouble. He says, it's the things that you know for sure that just ain't so. It's the things that you know for sure that just ain't so. Those are the things that get you in trouble. Those false narratives, those false beliefs, those limiting thoughts that hold you back, that just simply aren't true. Those are the things that get you in the biggest amount of trouble. So, I'll maybe give you guys a minute here too.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have a limiting belief, but you don't know what contradicts it, how do you move forward? Like if it's not something as simple as, you know, I'm a good business owner, or I don't know.
Okay. Well, maybe start by this. Start by writing down the exact opposite of that.
Okay.
Writing. So like you've got your limiting belief.
Yeah.
Write down the exact opposite of that. Write down the exact opposite of whatever that belief might be. And then maybe see if you can write down anything that might corroborate or support that statement.
Okay. That's
you know,
helpful.
so for one belief that comes up oftentimes, you know, I work with some, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and solopreneurs. Okay. And sometimes the belief comes up that they need a lot of money to build a business. Right. And I mean, I think that could be probably a pretty common belief or pretty common thought. But there's actually a book by, is it John Damon? Is he Damon John? is the FUBU guy. The guy from Shark's Den, right? Damon John, I think is his name. He wrote a book called The Power of Broke. He wrote a book called The Power of Broke, and he talks about the importance and how actually starting a business with little to no capital could actually be one of your biggest advantages, because it forces you to become creative and to develop the best possible product or service and to market it in unique ways. You know, when he started FUBU, he had nothing. He had a couple of t-shirts, and I think it was really only a couple. He had like 10. And he would go around and he'd get his buddies to put them on music videos and things like that. People were, you know, doing the advertising in the music video. But then when the music video was over, he'd go back to them and be like, okay, I need my t-shirt back. You know, and he'd take his t-shirt back, and then he'd go and he'd reuse it, and he'd go and do a different venue. And that's how we started to build that awareness and build that brand, was by being creative and by being, what would be the word, I don't know, inventive. You know, I think oftentimes to Albert Einstein, you know, and when my quote there, or my belief that came up was that I'm not smart enough. You know, Albert Einstein famously said that, you know, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you know, it will forever think that it's useless or that it's stupid. You know, Albert Einstein said that there is genius in each and every single one of us. It's our ability to be able to discover it and share it. But everybody's genius looks a little bit different. Maybe I'm not great at math. Maybe I haven't taken the time to develop that. But maybe I have genius level qualities in other areas. So we'll take a couple of minutes here. I'm going to put on some music again. So let's see if you can come up with 3 or 5 statements that contradict that belief. And then the last step would be to even like maybe write an affirmation about that. Write an affirmation in support of the new belief. Okay. I'll put on some music here and I'll give you guys about 5 minutes. Okay, wonderful. So, I see a couple people still writing, but we're going to take a little break here. Okay, so we're going to take a little 10-minute intermission. Okay, and I'll leave the room open and I'll leave some music on, and you guys are welcome to stay here if you like. But we got to take some time to bathroom break, fill up our water, grab a coffee, anything that we need to do. If we've done this little activity, okay, and we've followed along, we should have a belief or a series of beliefs, maybe a series of statements that contradict that belief, and maybe even a new affirmation or series of affirmations that now support that new, more empowering belief that we've created. Okay. Now, the last step to this is symbolic, but the last step would be to take that initial part of the paper, or if you did it on a separate page, and either burn it or tear it up and discard it as a symbol of releasing it and letting it go. Okay. And I know, you hear stories of stuff like this from like high school when people get in a fight and they burn pictures of their like, boyfriend or girlfriend and stuff like that. And, it sounds like kind of a silly little exercise, but I've done this in various times in my life with different things where you burn the piece of paper that's got whatever it is written on it. It's very, I would even go so far as to say something like therapeutic. And it really is a feeling of either release or letting go. So that would be the final step to that letting go phase, and keeping front of hand and keeping close this new affirmation or these new beliefs, so that anytime that old belief crops up or rears its ugly head, you've got like a pocket full of answers or responses to combat that old negative, denying, disempowering thought or belief. Okay. Now that was the first clearing exercise. That was the clearing exercise number 1. We're going to take a little 10-minute break right now, and we'll come back at 1/4 after. Okay. And we're going to complete, there's 3 more little exercises. 3 more little exercises. So any questions or any comments before we go, or is everybody good? Okay, beautiful. Well, I'll put on some music. I'll leave the room open, and I'll meet you guys back here in 10 minutes. Sound fair? Okay, beautiful. See you guys shortly.